Hello friends, my name is Tyler Brownrigg and welcome to another episode of Hitting the Field's main show. Today it's going to be fun. We're going to be talking a recap of the F1 season so far in the first three races. Following that, we'll be looking at the National Women's Soccer League for the first time on this show's history, which I think is pretty exciting. And then finally for the rant, I'll be talking about the rise of sports gambling in the United States and how it's affected both the leagues and sports media. I think it's going to be really interesting this episode, so you won't want to miss any of it. Main show starts right now.
Things gon' change when I really hit the field. Undefeated champs, man, you know what's the deal. Tryna find a kid, I'm in the field doing drills. Boy, you just a sucker, you ain't never keep it real. 3 rings in my hand, I'm a warrior to the max. When I hang it up, they gon' have to give me plaques. Step up in the building and I only bring the facts. When I make a highlight, they gon' replay, run it back, okay? Always locked in, now I don't got time to lax. Saying he the best, he could take a lap. Batted 1,000 when you check the stats. Boy, is you ready? You ain't gotta ask.
And we are back. And joining me here for this F1 segment, we have Franki Noble and Jovanni here at the desk. But we actually have a guest over on the monitor making his debut, Daliburt, making his on-air debut here for Hitting the Field. How are you feeling being on here for your first time? All right, so let's just jump right into F1. So we're 3 races in so far to the F1 season with the Japanese Grand Prix this weekend. So let's start it off with the recap, starting with the Bahrain Grand Prix, which kicked off this season. Dali, tell us about what happened in Bahrain.
Yeah, so Bahrain, Max Verstappen continued his dominating season from last year. The Red Bull scoring a 1-2 podium, and Carlos Sainz being third in the podium. They have continued to show their dominance. Ferrari has improved their car overall, being able to be more aggressive, not worrying about defending or worrying about tire degradation. McLaren has improved their car from continuing from last year, and Mercedes have completely changed their full car concept. Now they're 2 years, taking up their new concept. Now it's like they're in the unknown about what they're able to do, and it's a lot of testing and trial and error from the season this season.
Again, a lot of improvements we've seen, and maybe Ferrari starting to be able to compete with Red Bull for that constructors title, and maybe even Charles competing for the world championship against Verstappen. But now moving on to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Jovanni, why don't you give us a recap of that?
Yeah, like Dali said, another 1-2 finish for Red Bull. Max was number 1, Sergio was number 2. Max said the car has performed well and even better than anticipated. But speaking for Ferrari, Charles, he feels like they should maximize their package. By the time necessary adjustments were made, Ferrari could not recover the time that they did lose. And then speaking for McLaren, they had a disadvantage in straight lines for this race. Oscar got stuck behind Lewis for 20 laps of the race. And then finally for Mercedes, George Russell felt that Mercedes is having up and down performances, and Russell spent a vast amount of time behind Alonso. So.
Mm-hmm. I think the big thing, especially with Mercedes, which we'll touch into, is their struggles, especially Lewis Hamilton. But as I said later, we'll touch on that after we're done recapping the races. In our most recent race, the Australian Grand Prix, a lot happened in Australia. This is the one I really wanted to touch on. So Frankie, tell us what happened in Australia.
Yeah, this one was the exciting one, and I stayed up to watch it, so I was pretty excited about that. The drama started FP1, which is crazy. Alex Albon crashed going into turn 6 for the 2nd year in a row in Australia. And instead of having him not compete, they decided to take Logan Sargent out of his car and give it to Alex Albon, which is, I've never seen anything like that. I understand why they did it. They thought he was going to score more points. Spoiler alert, he didn't get any points, but I understand why they did it. Getting into the actual race, it started with Max at pole position, obviously, with Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris right behind him. In lap 3, Max DNF'd, which, we can all agree, nobody expected that. But even before that, Carlos overtook him, which was also unexpected. So it was just a crazy, crazy Grand Prix. George Russell DNF'd on the last lap of the race for the 2nd time in his career. Also, last time he DNF'd was also when Carlos won, so that's kind of funny. And then Lewis Hamilton DNF'd on lap 17, which we're going to talk about Lewis Hamilton, which he's not making a name for himself this year, which isn't great.
I know. George Russell, if you're not familiar with F1, George Russell, his issue is he can't stop crashing sometimes. I don't get what the issue is. He's a very dangerous driver for Mercedes and has been an issue a lot. And another thing I want to touch on is Aston Martin. They've been really disappointing to start this season. Fernando Alonso especially. Obviously, he doesn't have a teammate worth a damn in Lance Stroll, who's a
Nepo baby.
He is a Nepo baby, and he is just awful. But, it's been rough for us Alonso fans trying to, have something to be happy about. Hopefully he'll get a race win this season, I pray. But obviously, with a guy with Verstappen, it's tough to predict that because of just how dominant he is, and every race he's starting in pole position. His victory is just insane. But we'll talk more about Verstappen later. You mentioned Lewis Hamilton was a DNF in this race. Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, or 8, depending on who you ask, has been a poor performance is kind of undermining it. He currently sits at 10th in the driver's standings with only 8 points, which is just very, very out of character for both him and Mercedes in their past years. But Dali, you mentioned how Mercedes has a new car this season for the second year in a row. What do you think is being the bigger factor for Lewis's poor performance? Is it the new car? Is he maybe looking ahead to Ferrari? What is the issue here?
It's about the car now. F1 is primarily about designing the car and the car that you get is what you want and it's driving on track. Mercedes has pretty much not the best car out there. Last season, the season prior to the 2015, I think anything from being changed onset because they need to improve. They have to do a lot of trial and error and testing.
All right, so now let's move on to individual racers that we want to, or drivers that we want to highlight. I'll start it off, just get the obvious out of the way. Max Verstappen, the three times in a row world champion. He has been amazing to start this season, to no one's surprise. His average margin of victory in his 2 wins, 17 seconds. He has been dominant. He's first in the driver's standings with 51. Red Bull is also first in the constructor standings. I just don't know how you beat him. The RB20, which is the car, this arguably is maybe the best car F1 has ever seen. He is just so dominant, and it's just a given. He's always starting in pole position. It's almost a given he's going to win. Will he probably? He won, I believe, 19, 20 of the races last season. People were like, he probably is going to win them all. And the only way I think he can't is like what happened in Australia, is a DNF.
I agree. I think, especially now that Carlos won in Australia and he DNF'd, I think he's coming back with a vengeance and he's going to want to win literally every race left. And I honestly think he could do it. There's no one else that I would be like, yeah, they're going to win every race except for Max Verstappen. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's insane.
We are going to be hearing the Dutch national anthem quite a bit this year, to no one's surprise, really. So, Dali, tell us about your race driver that you want to talk about.
Yes, I would like to talk about this is his race week, Japan. So, since last season, RB has been bringing in good drivers, trying to push his feet and just testing to see if he's really confident. And he has proven, right again, that he is a good driver. He guys had Nick Princess as teammate, and he got accidents season. Now they brought in Daniel Ricciardo. Yet again, Yuki has scored more points than Ricciardo. Even during the Bahrain Grand Prix, there was a driver swap when they were competing for points. Yuki has just proven that he is getting stronger, and he's really dedicated to the team, and he's a good driver.
I agree. I will say there's a bit of one concern, though, that I see risen a lot about Yuki is he has a bit of an anger problem. On radio, he's been known to lash out at his engineers, and it causes him to maybe make some risky decisions driving. Do you think this is something that he's moving past now, or maybe still an issue for him?
They always say always have to try hard, and Yuki, I don't think it's going to be dying anytime soon. Like I said about Bahrain, he's never too pleased about that. He heard the radio, it was very aggressive and loud. And I think that is one of his major issues that might not be because I don't think the Red Bull for the next coming season is because of his anger. And Red Bull is not a team that plays with those types of emotions. They need consistency and points. If he's going to be one
All right, now let's move it on. Jovanni, who is your driver?
I'm actually very excited to talk about Carlos Sainz because if you guys know, I did talk about him on bets, and I did have him winning the Suzuki track for the next
For the
race.
Japanese Grand Prix?
Japanese, yeah. And I just want to say I've been very impressed with the way that he's been performing, especially with that appendicitis that he had. His appendix was removed. And
It shaved off 2/10.
exactly.
Say.
Yeah.
2 weeks later and he won.
Yeah, we have something in common because also my appendix was removed.
So that's why you chose
Yeah,
him.
that's my twin, man. But for him to come back and to perform like that and win like he did, I would like to say I'm very impressed with that.
Yes, Carlos currently sits 4th in the driver standings overall with 40 points. But I think a big criticism for him is just the fact that he drives for Ferrari. Ferrari has constantly disappointed, really ever since 2007 ended. That has been their issue. They've with bad pit stops, poor strategy, their engineers not being able to communicate. So, do you think he's just going to have to be able to overcome the issues of Ferrari, or do you think maybe Ferrari this may finally be the year where it all comes together and they can compete for a world title?
I don't know if you could come with that conclusion due to the fact that he knows that he doesn't know where he's going to be next year. I feel like that would also be like a mental block in his mind. But I would say he would kind of have to, overcome it. But just for him not knowing where he will be driving next year, that's a big problem.
I agree with Lewis coming into Ferrari next season. He's currently fired, honestly, and out of a job. But now moving on to our final driver, and Franki's very excited to talk about this guy. Tell us about him.
My personal favorite is Lando Norris. He currently sits 6th with 27 points. He has never won a race, but that's okay, because it's coming. It is. I promise it's coming. He debuted in F1 in 2019 and has stayed with McLaren his entire career so far, which is great. He's a young driver. He has 14 podiums to his name, which is great since 2019. It's not bad. He just hasn't gotten that win yet, which is bad. I think his first win could be in Japan. It could be a wet race, which he thrives on. And the last Japan race, it was a double podium for McLaren, and it was the first time since 2021 Monza. So they like competing in Japan, and I think that they can compete at a high level in Japan, and I think Lando's really, really, really wants that win, as we all know. I mean, he even said he might just get his appendix taken out like Carlos and he'll be fine. But he wants it so bad, and I know that he can do it. He just placed 3rd in Australia, so he has the momentum going. He just needs to keep it going. Maybe he'll play 2nd at Australia, and then the next one he'll get that win. If he doesn't win in Japan, I can see him winning in Silverstone, maybe, but he's still so young and he has so much potential, and I think he's a great driver. He'll win. I hope he wins.
He's due for a win,
He
He's very much due. But that is sadly all the time we have for F1. Thank you all for joining us. Shout out Dali once again for making your debut. It was great having you on. But stick around because after this we'll be talking the National Women's Soccer League and you won't want to miss it.
Hello, my name is Tyler Brownrigg. I hope you're enjoying watching whatever show it is that's playing right now here on Hitting the Field Network. And if you're interested in more of our shows or want to know more about the one you're currently watching, don't worry, I'm here to tell you. Our week starts off on Mondays with HTF Bets, hosted by the Bets Boys, Andrew Montana, Ezrah Hines, and Jovanni Saint-Surin. You can catch that show live Mondays at noon for all things betting in sports. I highly recommend it. And then you can follow it off on Tuesday with The Combine, hosted by the illustrious Ty Patton. If you're in for a more laid-back, kind of podcast-style show, a lot more casual, that is definitely the show for you. Maybe you'll catch some Ty Squared action with me on there. Wednesdays, every week, you'll be able to catch the vlog, learn about what's going on behind the scenes here in the studio at Hitting the Field, get to know more about us, especially the people behind the camera, who they are, and what we do to make these shows every week. And on Thursdays, live at noon, you can watch the main show with me as your host every Thursday, where we'll be covering all of the major storylines for any sport, be it football, basketball, hockey, soccer, you name it, we'll be talking about it on the main show. And then Friday, you can watch Nighttime with your hosts, Maddie Glass and Patrick Previty, for all things college sports, especially with a focus on UCF sports and maybe the ones you haven't heard about so often, like tennis or women's track and field. It can be anything college on Nighttime. And if you're interested in joining Hitting the Field and you're a UCF student, DM us on any of our social medias at Hitting the Field, and also give us a follow on all those and subscribe to this channel if you want to catch more of our content. But enjoy the rest of your show. As always, I'm Tyler Brownrigg, and I'll be seeing you.
And we are back. And joining me here to talk National Women's Soccer League, I have Edgar Rodriguez to my left and Ezrah Hines to my right. So let's just jump right into it. And before we start talking about the league overall and some teams we want to highlight, the Sports Business Journal called Orlando the best sports city in America right now. And I guess my question to both of you is, are the Orlando Pride a contributing factor to this? And are they maybe a championship caliber team right now in the NWSL?
So probably this year it's a stretch. The Orlando Pride, their best result was in 2017 when they made the semifinals, just falling at the second to last hurdle there. But Orlando Pride have consistently been a kind of mid-table, kind of pushing for the playoffs or either missing out by slim margins. Last season they missed out by just 2 goal difference to the Gotham, who ended up winning the championship last season. So look, the Pride, they have a solid foundation. They're definitely an asset to the league. I mean, combined with Orlando City, their combined worth is around $500 million. So they definitely add to the league and to North American soccer as a whole. But this year, I think it's a stretch.
Yeah, they're currently 9th in the table with only 3 points, all 3 of their matches being draws. So they're definitely not a competitive team. I say this is because they got rid of Kristen Scott. This is just karma. This is revenge. That's just my superstition talking right there. But Ezra, do you have any thoughts on the Orlando Pride?
Yeah, I think exactly what Edgar said, I completely agree with. They're not really a super competitive team for the title, but they are very competitive for making the playoffs and stuff. I do think what has helped us be a great sports city and what has came from the Orlando Pride is the players that they've gotten over the past years. Like they've had players like Alex Morgan, Ali Krieger, Sydney LaRue, and then of course obviously Marta, who's known amazingly around the world.
Absolutely.
Like we're talking about one of the best ever. This is something that has really helped propel us along the way to become one of those top sports cities. Do I think we're there yet? Not quite. Do I think we're making our way up? Absolutely.
Yes, Orlando is definitely a city on the up and up in terms of the sports world. Pro football team in their future? Maybe, probably not. But now let's move on to teams we want to highlight that are actually relevant in the current table standings. So, Edgar, I'll start off with your team. Give us your team that you want to talk about and an X Factor player on that team.
So I chose the New York, New Jersey Gotham. Just a side fact, I am from New Jersey, so I'm also repping. But of course, the reigning champions from last season, the Gotham, finished 6th in the standings and went on to win the whole thing. Probably not a lot of people would have guessed that. And they went from strength to strength. They won the championship, and yet they still went on to sign the likes of Rose Lavelle, Emily Sonnet, and Tierna Davidson, all U.S. women's regulars. And so that familiarity, I feel like, will definitely help them push potentially for a repeat championship. I don't think that's too far off. And then, of course, the X factor is Crystal Dunn. They signed her off of free agency in the offseason. She, of course, previously played for Washington Spirit. She went over to England to play for Chelsea and for the NC Courage and Portland Thorns. So she has all this experience that she can bring to the table for the Gotham. And like I said, they won the championship and they didn't rest on their laurels. They went and strengthened again. So look, they've won one so far, lost one. The next game is versus the Current, which is going to be a huge game.
Big game.
So yeah, I think the Gotham are definitely an exciting team this season.
So yeah, they're currently 7th on the table with 3 points, as you said, one win, 1 loss in their 2 games. But as you said, they finished 6th in the standings on their championship run. So do you think this is something that should maybe be cause for concern, that they're only 7th and they shouldn't be higher on the table right now as reigning champs?
Right. So their 2 opening games were against the Thorns and the Courage. So it's a tough start. And it's only 2 games in. Yes, 7th. So you can't really read too much into the table so far. But I think the Gotham are going to grow into the season, and they're definitely going to be a contender.
All right, and now let's moving on to my team. And you just mentioned them. They're playing the Gotham next. The Kansas City Current.
Yes.
The Current have been quite the story in the NWSL this season. They're currently top of the table, perfect 3-0, 9 points. And I think this is really surprising because they have gone really from worst to first. Yeah. Last year they were 11th in the table, 2nd to worst in the entire league. And their success, I think, has come to a shock to many. Like a turnaround this big is like.
Yes.
Now, and I think the big reason for their turnaround is their X factor. This player they just signed, Temwa Shawinga out of Nigeria. Yes. She has been outstanding for them. She has forced her way into the starting 11. And she started 2 games for them, played in all 3. She's currently tied for first in the entire league in assists with 2. And she has just been amazing for them on the attack. Majority of her shots are on target or shots on goal. She has been great she's very aggressive, great in pushing the attack with her teammate Vanessa in the midfield, who is like an all-11 in the NWSL. So again, they've been complementing each other amazing. She is also tied for first in assists with 2 as well. But again, Kansas City has just been they are off to a hottest start as you can get, and now they're playing the reigning champs next. I think this is momentum that they can sustain with they have just been so talented.
No, for sure, 100%.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, we like you said it completely amazingly. Like, this has been a team that nobody thought was going to be up there. Like, I genuinely, if you asked me where the Kansas City Current was finishing this season, I would have told you still same exact position, regardless of getting Shawinga or anything. I would have been like, okay, Shawinga will be great, but it'll be like one of those sides that's like not a great side with a good player in it. It's like that one sole piece. I didn't think that this would completely take over the entire league. It is only 3 games in so far, but I mean,
yeah, it is
it's
early,
something to watch.
but
Something to watch.
It's
Absolutely.
a start like this can't be ignored.
No, absolutely not.
All right, so now moving on to our final team. Ezra, tell us about yours.
Yes, I'm going to be covering the North Carolina Courage, which they have been pretty much the exact same as last season. They're 3rd in the standings right now. They were 3rd last season. They didn't really do great in the playoffs, but this year they might be doing a little bit different. They've had a rock-solid defense all season long. They're currently 2-0-1. They've lost their only game to the Utah Royals, which I felt they got hard done by very much so. They literally, it was a 2-1 game. And the Royals literally only had 2 shots. So they scored their only 2 shots of the game, which was super unfortunate as in comparison to North Carolina's 15, which I'm just saying. But they did also win 5-1 against Houston Dash. We kind of expect that. 1-0 win against Gotham, the defending champions, which was a great defensive game from them. And one of the star players that I actually wanted to highlight is the person that sits in front of the defense. It's Denise O'Sullivan. She's currently their CDM right now. She is absolutely unreal to watch. Like, she is literally like N'Golo Kante-esque, but like better passer. She's literally, all right, so currently she's in the 95th percentile in the world at midfielders with pass completion percentage with 86.2, very close to what she finished with last season, where she was 1st in the league. 94th percentile in tackles for midfielders with 3.6, which she is currently, I think, 4th in the league for right now. And of course, that's in the world as well. And she's just everything you want out of your CDM. She finished last season in the best 11, 2nd team. Like, this is exactly, they're on pace to do exactly what they want to, if not better again. And I think that they could genuinely do a takeover this season.
I agree. North Carolina, they have been great, though, and I think their success can be more sustainable than maybe Kansas City right now.
100%,
we can predict, like, because they've been here before. This is the expected result. But sadly, that is all the time we have for NWSL. It was great talking with both of you about this. Had a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
But you're going to want to stick around for this rant as I talk about how sports betting has taken over America.
Jack, buddy, why are you here?
I don't really understand why I'm here. I got called a delusional fan. I just don't understand why I'm delusional if I think Kirk Cousins had the best mustache in the league.
Well, Jack, buddy, I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but I don't think anybody looks cool in handlebars.
But they're back, man. They're back.
They're not. They're not. Sometimes you just got to face the hard truth. It's right there in front of you. All these people, they're calling you delusional, but sometimes you got to worry about, am I projecting? Is it me? And in this
Let me
case,
tell you something, bud. It could never be me. Anything I say is factual and truth, and that's why the Vikings are going 16-1 this year.
Organization, you have to look at your roster and say, I've had Kirk O'Duggins for 6 years. Maybe it's time to move on.
There is no moving on from Perk Thuggins and Justin Jefferson.
Do you think that maybe this all started just because of a little disappointment?
Nothing has started. This is how I live, and I am not delusional. I'm a prophet.
And we are back. It is time for the rant once again. And I want to talk about sports betting, all right? Sports betting has taken over America ever since it was legalized by the U.S. Supreme Court in the 2010s, as anyone can see, by just the sheer amount of advertisements you can find literally anywhere, be it on TV, paper ads, or just billboards down the street that you see. Gambling has now become so ingrained into sports that it is now part of the viewing experience. And while the hold that it has over the American consumer is very real when it comes to things like gambling addictions, how many things you can bet on, et cetera, what I want to address today is how sports books are starting to become perhaps too intertwined with the very leagues they allow us to bet on, and now sports media itself. So nowadays, you'll see whenever you're watching, say, an NFL game, MLB game, whatever it may be, every single one of the four major American sports leagues has an official partnership with at least one of the major sports books in America, be it FanDuel, DraftKings, whomever. And however, though, there was a time when the major sports leagues wanted zero association with them. They treated sports books like the plague. A prime example of this is the NFL. Back in 2007, the NFL would refuse any and all sponsorship offers from sportsbooks, as they felt it would start having people question the integrity of the game. Famously, they said, "We want to keep the Super Bowl out of Las Vegas forever." However, the Super Bowl was just in Las Vegas this past year, and now we have an NFL team in Las Vegas. This mindset was shared by all the leagues at one point in their history, at one point or another. They all thought gambling is a problem, or not a problem per se. It's like, we don't want our leagues to associate with sports books because then the integrity of our game comes into question, and we don't want the fans worrying about that. Now, however, despite these concerns and beliefs that the leagues have held, there have still been gambling scandals in pro sports at the league level and when it comes to players. A big example that people will point to is former NBA official Tim Donaghy, who bet on games he officiated and went on to even claim that the 2002 Western Conference Finals were allegedly rigged in favor of the LA Lakers against the Sacramento Kings. And I would say that there is a clear conflict of interest here when it comes to the sports books having a partnership with the very leagues they allow people to bet on. The leagues make more money through sponsorships if the sports books makes more money, and they want to keep their sponsors happy. And it has even gotten to the point where teams themselves are making sponsored social media posts talking about how a player just hit a prop bet or the odds for their next game, whatever it may be. So teams can do these advertisements with gambling companies, but if a player tries to gamble, their consequences are severe and can possibly ruin their career. We have examples such as Calvin Ridley in the NFL with Atlanta before he went to the Jaguars. There was the NBA player with the Raptors just now recently. Of course, the biggest scandal going on, Shohei Ohtani. There's now an investigation into him and his possible sports betting and what he did with his $4.5 million and his interpreter. And the leagues take these gambling issues very, very seriously. And it feels like a bit of a double standard, wouldn't you say? I'm of the mindset of this, but now I want to move on to the second aspect of how sports betting is dangerously being involved in the sports world, and that is how it is being involved with sports media. Specifically, I want to talk about the issue that is the existence of ESPN Bet. Now, for those of you who don't know, on November 14th, 2023, ESPN Bet was launched. And the reason this should be a problem is painfully obvious. ESPN, ESPN is the largest sports media company on earth. And now they have their own sports book. That's a clear conflict of interest. A sports book is a for-profit company now a media tyrant in the sports industry has a sports book. This is the type of conflict that have people asking if anything they say is true, because ESPN now has the power to control a narrative that can be bet on and directly profit off of that outcome. An example of this would be maybe you see Adam Schefter reporting a player is, say, we'll use Calvin Ridley as the example. Calvin Ridley is likely to sign with, say, the Indianapolis Colts, and that's the storyline that gets thrown around. But he ends up signing with the Tennessee Titans, a team that had plus 1,000 odds for him to sign with. That is the slippery slope we can go down here. This is a real concern. And furthermore, what I want to talk. Here's a clip of ESPN analyst Reese Davis talking about ESPN Bet that I want to highlight just to show how dangerous their language and rhetoric can be. Here it is.
Seems low at 60.5. I'm going to go under there.
You know what? Some would call this wagering, gambling. I think the way you sold this. No, I think what it is risk-free investment. That's the way to look at it.
Aaron, positive way.
Aaron Dolan from ESPN Bet with the best.
That was a reporter, not a gambling addict, not some business mogul, a reporter who is held to a certain standard of integrity, calling gambling a risk-free investment. That's like if I told you a great way to save up for your kid's college fund is to light money on fire. It's insane. Now, I want to emphasize, this type of language and possible conflict is radically different from, say, a show like our HTF Bets that we have here, because ESPN is now giving betting advice based on their own numbers that their sportsbook makes and that they directly profit off of. Typical sports gambling shows base their numbers off of other sportsbooks like DraftKings or FanDuel. It's not their own numbers that they are then talking about. This is something that is dangerous. This is, as I said earlier, the potential of going down an extremely slippery slope that can lead to possible collusion or worse. And this is something that people should be made aware of so that real change can happen so that this is completely avoided. ESPN Bet should not exist. It is very, very dangerous and how it can impact sports reporting and sports media as a whole in general. I don't want sports media to be something that people start looking at and not trusting all the time because, well, maybe the sports books want us to think that so they can make more money. I love sports reporting. I grew up watching SportsCenter. Names like Scott Stewart, Reese Davis, who I grew up idolizing, and so on, all right? I don't want this great thing that we have to be ruined by gambling. Gambling is a real problem, and people should be made aware of those problems. And that is the message that I want to deliver. But sadly, that is all the time we have for this episode of Main Show. I hope you enjoyed it. Catch us next week for another great show. But as always, I'm your host, Tyler Brownrigg, signing off.
Things gon' change when I really hit the field. Undefeated champs, man, you know what's the deal. Tryna find a kid, I'm in the field doing drills. Boy, you just a sucker, you ain't never keep it real. 3 rings in my hand, I'm a warrior to the max. When I hang it up, they gon' have to give me plaques. Step up in the building and I only bring the facts. When I make a highlight, they gon' replay, run it back. Okay, always locked in, now I don't got time to lax. Saying he the best, he could take a lap. Batted 1,000 when you check the stats.